Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Black-Owned Labels Part 2. Okay. I'm very honored that two of my very distinguished, very knowledgeable colleagues agreed to participate today. The first person I'm going to introduce is Bobbe Marovich, who's going to present on Idessa Malone, recording the sounds of the Motor City before Motown. Bobbe Marovich is an independent writer and historian, radio host, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Gospel Music, and knows pretty much everything about gospel music recordings. I've requested information on various occasions. You may recognize him from his book reviews published in the Ars Journal, previous presentations at Ars conferences, or music reviews for Living Blues. He's written articles on American music for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Chicago Trib, Chicago Reader, Chicago History, and Zocalo Public Square. He is the author of 2 books on gospel music, both of which were awarded Certificate of Merit by ARSC, and he was nominated for Grammy Awards in the Best Album Notes category in 2019 and 2021, and recently received an award for the Los Angeles Press Club for his 2024 Zocalo article on Black songwriter Ted Jarrett. Please welcome Bobbe Marovich.
This is my timekeeper here. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brenda. It's great to be presenting with John, who I greatly admire for many years. It's funny talking this morning about how many Black-owned or Black-run record labels there were, and I was thinking with all the people that were mentioned, there were like almost 14 labels just run by Black women in Detroit alone. If you look at Johnny Ray Matthews, Delmar Ray, Idessa Malone, and Carmen Murphy, combined almost are about 13 or 14 different labels. But I'm here to talk about Idessa Malone. I want to also thank Adam Stanfill, Brenda, and Hannah Engstrom for all your help, those of you who are here, for providing some of the information I'm going to provide to you today. Idessa Malone was a multi-hyphenate. She was a record company owner, a distributor, a publisher, an engineer, a producer, an arranger, an album notes writer, woman after my own heart. She co-owned a record shop. She was a radio announcer and a beauty consultant. And yet we don't know very much about her at all. I think there's a couple of reasons why. One is that throughout her entire record owning career, she only had one #1 hit, and that was as a result of just having it distributed by another record label. And secondly, about halfway through her career, around 1960, she pivoted to doing custom recordings for churches, pastors that wanted to record their sermons, and all but dropped out of the pop music world, but focused essentially on regional recordings. So I think in many respects, one of the reasons we don't know more about her was that she kind of, at the last 20 years of her career, she kind of dropped off the radar. But I want to talk a little bit about her early days and focus on her Detroit years in particular. We'll end with some idea of what she did post-Detroit. And if I have a minute or two, I'm going to slip in a bit about Carmen Murphy because there is a connection between Carmen Murphy of Hobb Records, House of Beauty, and Idessa Malone. One of the things you'll find in this presentation is that Idessa Malone was an entrepreneur. Just when you think you know the direction she's going, she surprises you. She was born, Idessa Dorothea Malone was born December 8th, 1913 in Market Tree, Arkansas, to Mamie Lowe Malone and Mill Malone, who was employed as a logger. And we don't know anything about her years in Arkansas. The next time we catch up with her is in 1929, when she graduates from Northeast Junior High School in Kansas City, Missouri, which was one of the first, if not the first, elementary schools for African American youth in Kansas City. Now, I've not been able to ascertain that she went to high school, but I suspect from reading her album notes and other things she's done that she did graduate from high school, in which case that would probably have been Sumner High School in Kansas City, Kansas, where she was living with her mother at the time. The father was out of the picture at this point. And Sumner High School was the first and only high school for African American youth in the entire state of Kansas at that time. After assuming high school, she worked at Blanche's Coffee Shop in Elnora's. She was a charming, fashionable, outgoing person. Society scene was her thing. This is a picture from when she was participating in a fashion show. So she was very much a sociable person. But, surprise, surprise, April 1st, 1935, a great surprise to her friends, noted the paper, she marries Mr. Kenneth M. Young of Joplin, Missouri. Now, I think that the marriage didn't last long, or certainly it was of no great consequence to her, because when she remarries in 1946 in Detroit, the part of the marriage certificate where it asks you, how many times have you been married before, she answered, none. So so we find her again. She's a national globetrotter. In 1940, she's living in Chicago, possibly dating a man named Clark. In mid-1940s, she's working at the El Grotto Supper Club, which was an entertainment venue on Chicago's South Side. And this is where I think she starts to take an interest in the field of entertainment, watching the musicians, the jukebox operators, and so forth. Some point in time, between 1945 and 1946, she takes a trip to New York. And she happens to meet Earl Bostick, by the way, born Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his wife, Hildegard. And they like her spirit. She's, again, engaging, very get-going, kind of personality. And Earl Bostick has sort of an interest here because he is now recording with a brand new label in New York called Gotham, run by Sam Goody and Ivan Ballin. And he thinks that Idessa Malone is the perfect person to serve as a representative of their company. Now, obviously he's hoping that she'll distribute his records pretty well too. So he introduces them to either Goody or Ballin, I'm not sure which one. And they think, yeah, let's set you up. She was living in Detroit at this point, and she becomes the salesperson for Gotham Records in Detroit. She gets an office in the back of Sam's record shop that she ultimately would own with Sam Taylor, and I believe they dated as well later on. She starts working for Gotham Records. Her big breakout for Gotham was 845 Stomp for Earl Bostick. I'm sure he was happy that his proposal to have her work for Gotham panned out for him as well. And she starts to get interest from other labels. Would you work for me? And Roy Milton is one of the first. In fact, he allegedly gives her some capital to expand her distribution enterprise into Idessa Malone Distributors, where she eventually represents Roy Milton's Miltone and Crystal Tone. She's distributing Gotham, Dial, Sunrise, Aristocrat, eventually Religious Recordings and Specialty. And she is now set up, she's now out of the record store at Hastings, and she's got her own spot on Verner Avenue in Detroit. But let's go back a bit, because this is her distribution. So she started in distribution. She, again, is a person who likes to be in society. She likes to go out at night. And at the time, the big place, the mecca for African American entertainment in Detroit was called Paradise Valley. And this is sort of a look at the Paradise Valley from a book called Before Motown, and all the different places that exist. My cat allowed me to use his little clicker here. Let me see if it's actually going to work. There's a little bit. Club 36 is at 6660 East Adams is the place where Idessa spends a lot of time. But as you can see, there's Paradise Theater, there's the Frolic Show Bar, the Flame Show Bar, the Parrot Lounge. This is the place to go at night in Detroit. Here's a picture of the Paradise Theater. Here's the Flame Show Bar. But Sport Trees, all these places. This is like the In Chicago, it was 47th Street. In Detroit, it was Paradise Valley. And she's hanging out here. She marries Melvin Rogers in December 1946. And by 1947, and I'll show you a picture of the 3 Sixes where she hangs out, that's Ted Buckner's orchestra. As early as July of 1947, she starts telling people, I want to start a record label to record local talent. And she doesn't really do anything with it right away. But in October of 1947, this October 23rd, she takes the Ted Buckner Orchestra. Ted Buckner is a great alto saxophonist, played with Jimmy Lunsford, and was sort of a mainstay at the 3 Sixes. Takes him and his crew into the studio and records 10 sides on October 23rd. Now, one of the reasons she had to do that, because this was a very difficult time to start a record label. It is October 1947. The AFM recording ban is about to start in January. So she's doing what all the other independents are doing. She's recording to beat the ban. So she puts out her first disc, and it's by Ted Buckner's orchestra. It's called Frolic Jump, and it's a nod to the Frolic Show Bar. Another group she records just a few days later, on the 28th of October, 1947, she records 8 sides with Milt Hinton's orchestra. Now, this is significant in that it's only the second session that Milt Hinton recorded with his own ensemble. And all of that came about because at the time, Hinton and his sidemen were touring with Cab Calloway as part of Cab Calloway's Jumpin' Jive Jubilee, which was at the Paradise Theater in October 1947 in Detroit. And apparently she convinced them to stay over a few more days and record with her. And so this is one of the first sessions that Milt Hinton did as a band leader. And here's Ooh La Fee. So great bassist Milt Hinton with Sam Taylor and Jonah Jones. Quite an ensemble to have as an early recording on your label, on Staff Records that she starts. Her first minor hit, a Detroit hit, comes with a set that she had done with the early initial 10 sides with Ted Buckner. And this is pairing Bobbe Caston, who had sung with Louis Armstrong, Erskine Hawkins, and had been appearing at the Frolic Bar and at Sport Trees. She had appeared on Arthur Godfrey's talent show that year. She was kind of an up-and-comer. And this was Idessa Malone's first minor hit on Staff Records.
Darling, with the words I long to hear, in your dark eyes so smiling, there's a promise I see, but your two lips won't say that
At this point, she is only recording on staff records. This is her sole label at this point. She's advertising in the trade press and in local press. From John Brovin's book, Record Makers and Breakers, record man Dave Usher describes Idessa Malone as a record owner, a record company owner. He said, she's efficient, outgoing, assertive, commanding, not an ass kicker, but she knew what she was doing. Baby, I looked up to her. She has several releases by this point. Again, 1948 is when these releases are going, when the ban is on. So no new recordings, just from her catalog at this point. But she's discouraged. As early as March of 1948, she tells the press that she doesn't like the fact that Oula Fee is not selling any better, Milt Hinton and his All-Stars. A little later that year, her quote to the public in the press was, how difficult it is to sell 10 inches of wax that is technically good and that is not crammed to the edge with shrieks, groans, bad balance, and all the other things of which the public crave. So you can tell she's starting to sour on the record business a little bit at this point. And in fact, in 1948, she decides to focus on her distribution company. She's successfully doing distribution with Idessa Malone Distributors, and she puts others in charge of staff, but retains a financial interest. And of course, always happens, as soon as you do that, here comes your big #1 hit. She happens to be hanging out at the Parrot Lounge in Paradise Valley, and here's a trio led by a fellow by the name of Red Miller. Now, he's singing a song called Bewildered, which had been in his repertory, he said, for 13 years, never recorded. She said, I want to record you. So she hustles him to the studio, which, as far as I can tell, she claims in the press that she had a studio, and Baby Boy Warren mentions this to a writer, that she had a studio in the back of her distribution company. I don't know how she could have fit Milt Hinton's orchestra in there, but certainly Red Miller's trio and some of the other artists. So she may have used some other studios at the beginning. But she records Bewildered by the Red Miller Trio, and it takes off on her. So much so, she cannot handle the demand. Those of you who know the record business know that you have to be careful with distribution nationally. You have to put a lot of money up front. I'm sure she didn't have that kind of capital. So she works with Bullitt. Jim Bullitt just started his own label in Nashville to distribute on his label Bewildered. And it becomes a #1 hit on Billboard's best-selling retail race records, #1 most played jukebox race records. It was estimated at 200,000 copies were sold nationwide. Idessa Malone apparently grabbed Red Miller and brought him to the pressing plant in Detroit and gave him his million seller, which, as you know, record company people, they're million sellers, they just paint them gold, and here's a million seller. I think it probably sold more like 200,000. Anyway, here's a snippet of Bewildered.
Of you, where is the love I knew? Why did we part?
And a lot of other places a lot of other artists began recording Bewildered as well. There were quite a few on the Billboard charts at that time. Now, at some point in April in 1948, she is sort of thinking of another label. And in April 1949, she announces that she started Dessa, as it was her nickname, Dessa, for Idessa. And her idea behind this label was as a co-op. She believed that the artists should own their own masters and then just simply lease them to her for release so that they could share the profits. This was her idea. If staffs are hard to find now, Dessas are almost impossible to find, so I don't think many Dessas were produced. I think there may have only been 5 or so releases on the Dessa label. Part of the problem, I think, was that it says copyright pending there. I think my understanding is that Decca had some issues with Dessa. And so they asked her not to use it, and she said, as a great entrepreneur should, well then, phooey on you, I'll call it Prize. So Dessa becomes Prize. And what's amazing about it, again, if you think Dessa's are hard to find, Prizes are even harder. But she presses a couple of blues folks on Prize and subsequently releases them on staff. And you may not know the name of Johnny Williams, but you probably know the name of John Lee Hooker. It's actually, to the dismay of discographers, she used Johnny Williams for John Lee Hooker and another bluesman, Baby Boy Warren. They're both named Johnny Williams. And it ticked off Baby Boy Warren because he thought maybe she was trying to get out of some royalties there. But some of these staff records on John Lee Hooker were then released on Gotham as well. So she maintained that relationship with Gotham to get more, and I think I've seen it more on Gotham than staff. But she recorded in 1949 a very young John Lee Hooker doing, this is the first example I know of his House Rent Boogie on staff.
Boogie. Let's get this rent together now.
I don't know if Prize had the same deal as Dessa, because I've been always aware that John Lee Hooker would record for anyone who gave him some money up front and then would go on to the next label and record. So I don't know if there was a co-op deal for John Lee Hooker or not. But those, I believe, were recorded in the back of her Idessa Malone distribution company on Verner. She also does some gospel. She gets into the local artists, Mamie Spann, Victoria and Thelma Hawkins, who are probably the most popular of her groups. They go on to record for Don Roby's Peacock label, and then the Detroiters, which was a local quartet. But now she's starting to, well, first of all, also in 1949, the manager of her distribution company, because by this point she's kind of back in the record business. She put her distribution company on the side. She put some gentlemen in charge of that, just as she had done with staff. And the manager of her distribution company was accused of concealing $22,000. So that was a lot of money in 1949. That's a lot of money now. And she is quoted as saying, "There's now no time to be a distributor anymore." She remains a buyer for Sam's Record Store, where she started her studio. She's now a co-owner of Sam's Record Store. And again, if you think you know what Idessa Malone's going to do the next year, she's going to surprise you and go on radio. She is now the first African-American female DJ in Detroit. And her point to the press was, she was on the air from April to August 1950, and they had a fairly broad range through Ohio, Michigan, Canada, and so forth. Her intention on her show from 11:30 p.m. to midnight, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, was not to focus on requests, not to focus on the latest hits, but solely to focus on new releases, which made sense. She's still in the distribution business at this point, or at least has a financial interest in it, so it kind of helps her both ways. She called her show variously Music in the Groove, Malone Music Manor, Idessa Malone Music Salon, but 1950 saw her really as a DJ and not in the record business. In 1951, she heads down to Louisville, and she wants to set up a studio there because she feels that the artists in Louisville, like the artists she felt in Detroit, aren't getting enough record interest. And she wants to record some of the local Louisville artists. She reaches out to Cliff Butler, who's sort of like the big artist and big jazz artist in Louisville at that time, and he says he doesn't want to do it. But she does encourage Benny Holton, pianist Carl Cowan, and apparently Marianne Fisher, but I've never seen any releases on Marianne Fisher. But this is from 1951. This is from her Louisville days, and this is Benny Holton's Boogie. So, just when you think she's going to start recording for staff again, she pivots again and decides to work for Sidney Nathan at King Records in 1953. Now, I can only imagine the efficient, assertive, commanding, no-nonsense Idessa Malone and Sidney Nathan working together. They probably fought like two cats in a bag. She wasn't there long, but she was long, well, she knew him, I want to mention this, she knew him early on because she had leased some Bobbe Caston releases from staff to King. This is from 1949. The Reverend John Highbaugh recording is from 1953, and she gets writing credit on this one, and she has a couple of other writing credits in the Copyright Office. But she's not there long. By 1955, she's back in Louisville. And this time, Cliff Butler says, yes, I will record for you. He brings his trio, which includes Benny Holton, and records some records on Favorite. This is a brand new label of Idessa. So if you're keeping track, she has Staff, Prize, Dessa, and now Favorite. And I spoke with Cliff Butler's son, and he did not remember. He was only a little kid when all this was happening. He didn't remember much of this, but he did remember the Davis Record Shop. And while Idessa was in Louisville, she was a manager at Davis Record Shop there in Louisville, which was apparently the place to go if you wanted to buy records, particularly in the African American community. At the same time, she is a beauty consultant. She starts working for Carmen Murphy. Now, if you know anything about Carmen Murphy, she was like the Madam C.J. Walker of her time. She had a beautiful beauty shop in Detroit. All of the elites went there. Apparently, Berry Gordy's sisters frequented it, but she also sold products. And she sold products at her beauty shop in Detroit, but she also had a national distribution network through consultants. And so you see there's Idessa Malone on the left from 1957 applying some makeup. You can demonstrate the products. And she's doing that in Louisville. By 1959, she is back in Chicago, living at the Sutherland Hotel. If you are familiar with that, the Sutherland Lounge was there, and VJ had an interest in that where you could hear some great jazz music. But she decides, for the most part, I'm getting out of pop music. And she decides she's going to be a record company for custom recordings. And this comprises the majority of the rest of her career until about the mid to late 70s. She goes around to churches. They pay her up front. She records them. She presses the records. She writes the album notes. And she gives them the boxes, and they could sell them, you know, go with God. If you sell all out, come back, I'll sell you more. It was a great deal for her because she got money up front. It was a great deal for them because they didn't have to handle all the trouble of recording. And she liked that. But it's interesting, when I interviewed people that worked with Idessa Malone in the 1960s for some of these recordings, they had a very different take on her. They didn't find her, well, I'll give you my quotes. She was not friendly. She did not talk or relate to people. She was abrupt. She was obstinate. You did it till you got it right. So my take on that is she was really calloused and jaundiced on this whole idea of the record business, as she had been bopping around for all this time as a black woman in essentially a white man's business. And so she was no nonsense. One of the most successful of the recordings of black churches was with the Fellowship Baptist Church, and a number of them said, they went to the best studio in Chicago, it was Universal, and they stayed all night until they got it right. But it did, there's one recording from the Reverend Clay Evans, a great civil rights activist, that was eventually became a gospel single, and this is it. It is no secret.
The chimes of time rang out the news, never days. Someone sleeping fair. Were that someone you?
That became Reverend Clay Evans's signature song. He sang it until he passed away. Now, I did want to point out there is a Tulsa connection. Although Idessa Malone eventually moved back to Arkansas, where she settled in Lone Oak, The president of her company, Reverend A.C. Dyer, was living at 1610 Apache in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I spoke with Reverend Dyer's son, and at the time, well, the family still owns it. They owned a funeral home. And he's still trying to figure out, he didn't remember, again, he was little when his father was involved with the staff records, is to figure out what exactly president of the company meant. My assumption at this point is that Idessa handled the recordings and he handled the financials, and maybe kind of served as an advisor. But again, Idessa Malone always surprises you. Even though she focused on these sort of bespoke recordings for pastors and churches around the country, she didn't completely leave pop music. And these may be some of the most interesting records that you wouldn't think Idessa Malone would record. Here are two of them from the mid-1960s. You notice she has publishing, Dessa, and this pops up a number of times on some of her later releases where she's taking the publishing on this. The first one is Northern Soul, I guess, called Let Me Try by the Arabians. Oops, I'm going to go back here. Back. Go back. We did speak to McKinley, and he remembers it was probably a tape that the Arabians did and gave to Idessa to put on wax and to distribute. Finally, I Couldn't Care Less by the Runaround. She puts on a new label called Manel, which is an elision of her last name. She married again, and for the final time, Paul Nelson in 1964. And so this label is Man-L, as in Malone Nelson. And she records I Couldn't Care Less. Let's see if I can get that to work. Yeah, thank you.
Again, so you left me at the dance. You let another take you home. That's the end of our romance. When you pass me in school, don't you bother to stop.
So as you can see, she still had this sort of custom pressing idea. She did, my time has run out. She did retire in Lone Oak, Arkansas. She died October 1st, 1987, a widowed woman. She had no children. Maybe just one stepsister is the only relation I can find. I want to conclude by saying that Lone Oak, Arkansas, a few years ago, decided to honor their hometown hero with the Idessa Malone Arts and Music Festival. And although I think it did not hit their expectations at the time, I don't think that they are adverse to doing it again. But again, the important thing is this story is not over. I hope to continue to uncover things, but you can just get a sense of the entrepreneurship of Idessa Malone and what it took to be successful as a black woman running a record company in the 1940s and 50s. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Okay, we've got a little bit of time for questions. Who would like to begin? Somebody? Yes. Wait for the mic, please. Yes.
Can you tell anything about Big J McNeely recording on the Fire label?
No, I can't.
Okay.
What record was that?
It was, I can't remember the title, but it was with a singer. I'll never think of it. Sorry.
There was an artist, band leader, Willis Jackson, who recorded for Fire. I wonder if that's who you're thinking of.
Well, I guess I shouldn't have asked until I could, because I don't quite know. I have the 45, and it's Big J with a male vocalist, but I can't think of his name.
No.
Sorry to waste your time.
Well,
Anyone else? Okay, hold on one sec. Oh. Okay.
That's it. Bobbe Marchand.
Bobby didn't record with, Bobby was from New Orleans. He was produced by Alan Toussaint.
Okay, meanwhile, does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the reason why AFO ended in tears was because Harold and the AFO gang produced Ya Ya, the Lee Dorsey hit, which was a #7 pop hit, for Bobby Robinson. And Juggy said, hey, where's my deal with AFO? And having a national top 10 didn't help matters at all. So what then happened was that Juggy signed Barbara George direct to sue away from AFO Records. So that, in effect, was the collapse of the AFO
imagine.
deal.
Yes, no doubt.
The wonderful record business.
Yes. Okay, we have one more question.
How long did AFO run after Batiste moved to LA?
Well, it was active in New Orleans after the Sue deal ended in 61, 62. They had about 10 releases altogether, 10 singles. There was that Tammy Lynn LP that you saw. And then the label went dormant. It was revived again in around about 1989. Harold moved back from the West Coast to New Orleans, became a professor at the University of New Orleans. And through my interview with him, through my friendship with him, I'd started as a consultant with Ace Records at the time, and he had all the master tapes, and I was able to do a deal to distribute the AFO label on CD on Ace Records, and we had 3 CDs, very proud of them, in what was called the Gumbo Stew series. So, yeah, Harold carried on right to the end, and then he wrote his autobiography, Unfinished Blues, which I can recommend to everybody here who wants to understand not only the New Orleans R&B scene, but also the jazz scene as well, because Harold was primarily a jazz man, reluctantly recorded R&B.
Thank you. Oh, yes?
A couple of questions in the chat.
From the audience, okay.
These are both for Robert Marovich. So the first one, was Idessa recording these artists in the studio herself?
I'm sorry, repeat that question?
Was Idessa recording these artists that you were talking about in the studio on her own, like by herself?
Was she the recording
Oh, well, she was the
engineer?
engineer, yes. Engineer was one of her deals. Now, that was in the first iteration of staff. I have to say, when she started recording customs, she was using United Sound Studio, and she was using in Detroit, and she was also using Universal in Chicago. So in that instance, no, she was not in charge. But when she was in the late 40s, early 50s, that was on her own, yes.
And another question also for you, Robert. So fantastic presentation, they say. It can be challenging to research women in the record industry. How did you approach researching her, meaning Idessa? Any tips for researchers trying to uncover more women's history within the recording industry?
Great question. Well, I think Brenda's probably well along that better than I. You know, I had known of Idessa Malone for many years. I think because I had seen one time somebody credited Vivian Carter as being the first black woman to own a record label, and I knew that just wasn't true. And as we've known, it's really not true. But I knew some of the people she had worked with. And then I just simply worked on finding any accounts on, you know, newspapers. I used newspapers.com, ancestry.com, and Adam Stanfeld had access to Michigan Chronicle just to find out more I could about her. I would recommend, if you're looking to do that, those are great resources, Ancestry, newspapers.com, and then just Michigan Chronicle. In our case, it was on microfilm, so I did, you know, had to see it on microfilm. But yeah, and then just try to find anybody that might have any connection with that person, who might know anything, or anybody who knows somebody else, you know, just kind of word of mouth.
But I must say that Bob and I recently uncovered some women who owned record labels, just because in one of my many texts to Bob, I said, oh, hey, you know, this is a gospel label in Chicago. Do you know who owned it? And he said, no, I don't, but let me ask somebody. And we turned up a couple of gospel labels, including the one, it was the Evelyn Gay.
Oh, Evelyn Gay, yeah, PEA, and then I think Faith. Yeah.
Right. And you had gone to her, was it her father? No,
yeah,
father.
her brother is still alive, and yeah, so it was just, you know, through the community, really.
Right.
Somebody like the gentleman you talked about on Soulful Detroit. Somebody knows somewhere.
Right. So purely by accident, we turned up, and this was just a month or two ago that we did that. So yeah, probably many more out there to discover. Mm-hmm. Yes. Go ahead.
Just one final word. First of all, thank you for attending, and but I'd like to give special thanks to Matt Barton. No, really. My tapes are now at the Library of Congress, and Matt kindly arranged for those Harold Baptiste and Bobby Robinson tapes to be digitized, and that was done long ago. Don't worry. Matt, very appreciative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. This concludes our session. I would put a plug in for David Soibert's session after lunch, even though it's not technically part of our Black-owned label session. He is going to be talking about the collection that started me on my journey and his efforts to digitize it and make it more available. So I'll put in a plug for that after lunch session. Thank you very much.
Well done, Brenda.